Hi everyone, we're the Candid Book Club and welcome back to our YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Linda, this is Mimi, this is Tanya, this is Omar, and this is Jess. And today we're going to be talking about Palestinian voices, the books that we've read in the past, the books that we're reading now, and the books that you should be reading in the future, and they belong on your shelves and TBRs. So we are going to start with Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. This is a book that you may or may not have heard of, but if you have heard about it, is because it was awarded the Frankfurt Literary Prize. And then because of everything that's happened, the people in Germany decided to revoke that literary prize away from the author. Which is shocking. But the best thing you can do for a book is to ban it.
Yep.
Because then people want to read it. As we're currently filming, this book is so hard to come by. So, I've had this book on my shelf for about a year, so I'm sort of ahead of this whole thing. But it is available on ebook to download on the Fitzcarraldo website, who's the publisher for this book in the UK, for about $3.99 or $4.99, but also on other platforms as well.
Yeah, I got mine on Apple Books.
Yeah,
$3.99, so it's pretty cheap.
And you got yours as well, didn't you?
Yep, I got mine from Kindle for $3.99. Super cheap.
And you borrowed my copy.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, which is this one.
I'm yet to read it.
And Tanya's going to read it.
Can you give us a synopsis?
Yes. So, quick rundown. This is probably one of the most harrowing fictional books that I've read. And I just wanted to start by saying that there are a lot of books, fiction books written about Palestine and Palestinian voices written in fiction form. But really, it's not fiction because it is real life. So just because they're fictional stories, don't believe that these things aren't true. They are completely 100% based on real life tellings of people's stories, their family stories, so much generational trauma. And in this book, Adania Shibli splits the book in two halves. We've got 1949, where there are a group of Israeli soldiers that have been tasked with basically taking over the Negev desert. And then they come across a Palestinian Bedouin family who they all shoot point blank. But one of the girls sort of gets away. They eventually find her, take her hostage, and her life comes to a bitter end. This is not me giving any spoilers. And then we fast forward in time to the second half of the book. So it doesn't give you the exact time point, but it's a few decades in the future from 1949. So we're probably thinking 60s or 70s, where there's a lady in the West Bank in Ramallah who comes across this story of this Bedouin girl in the literature, in newspaper clippings, and she becomes obsessed with this minor detail in history. Obviously, I love it when I come across the titles in the book.
Yeah.
So you don't really know why is it called minor detail. It's not really a minor detail, but it's something that happens so often that it's like seldom reported. So when she comes across it, she's just like, I really want to find out more about this story and what happened to this girl. So she goes on a personal quest to basically find out what happens, and she risks her life in the process. And you guys have to read it. It's only 110 pages.
Yeah.
So it's something that you can definitely read in like one sitting. So yeah, what did you guys think? I know you guys are still
about halfway through. I've literally just got to the end of part 1 and I'm about to start part 2, and it's harrowing, but brilliantly done. And actually worth noting, it's translated.
Yeah.
It wasn't written in English.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very well translated book. You don't lose any of the impact of the story, any of the kind of emotive part of it so far. Yeah.
Imagery is
really well done.
Yeah. So I actually finished reading this last night, and I struggled, even though it's such a short book, I struggled in terms of how to keep taking breaks because it is very detailed, it's very full on. And even though it's fiction, as Linda was saying, like you feel like it's not fiction. It's based on true stories. It's a lot of experiences that Palestinians have had in the past, they're probably having in the future. And I think even though you don't find out more details about the Bedouin girl, it's not really about that. It's more about her journey getting to like the museums or the archives in another part of town that she's not actually allowed to go to. So it's like just the restrictions that are put on Palestinians, how difficult their lives are, how so much of the scenery has changed when she's comparing like a map from 1948
to 1967,
current Israeli map, and just looking at the differences in terms of all of the Palestinian towns that no longer exist, roads that have been renamed, just all the changes and physical that she sees as well as she's going through the town. And I think that's the sort of harrowing, difficult part of it, because you just see how life is not, it's not free for them.
No.
I think that was the take home message. Yeah, because, you know, living in the UK, living in London, like, we take so much for granted, things that we don't even think about, like, you know, being able to take public transport and just going from here to
Jump
there.
in your car and just drive to Scotland if
Yeah.
you want to.
Go to the other side of the country. And we don't have ID cards. We don't have to pass checkpoints. We don't have to deal with, you know, military personnel on a daily basis. And I think that's what was really difficult about reading this story.
What about you, Jess? I know you haven't finished it.
I've just started the second chapter, so it's
The bit in the future.
Yeah. So I've just been introduced to the girl who's researching the story. And it's just very emotional. It's really emotional. It's heavy, but it's worth it. I can't explain how worth it is to open your mind and your horizons into reading stories like these, because these voices of people who are so oppressed in this way need to be amplified for the education of everybody, so that people can understand what's happening in the world and how we can move forward and learn from what's happening.
Yeah. And without sounding too preachy, like, there are people that are not able to amplify their voices, and we live in a privileged position where we have their voices written down. There's so much reading out there. It's not just because of what's happening right now that you should be, like, reading this book. Like, these are books that we've always read, we will always stand by. If it's because of what's happening at the moment that you choose to pick up this book, then so be it, but don't let your education stop there. We did mention before, like, when the whole Black Lives Matter movement started, everyone was, like, ordering the autobiography of Malcolm X, or Rennie Edo-Lodge's blogger talking to white people about race, and, like, these books got sold out, and that's great, but are you, like, learning from this? Are you using this to inform your knowledge and your conversations? Like, that's how it should go. It shouldn't be like you're buying the book to just sit and gather dust on your bookshelf, or to, like, act woke, because it ain't about that. So
yeah, and I think it's like, that's the whole point. That's, with reading, it, like, enriches your lives, it, you know, increases your knowledge. And I think we have to take the responsibility of educating ourselves. We can't put that burden on other people, and especially on, in this case, on Palestinians, to constantly educate us. We can do a lot of that reading and a lot of that work ourselves.
Yeah.
And one of the ways in doing that is reading books. And that can be both non-fiction as well as fiction, depending on what you prefer.
Exactly.
There's still a lot to learn from both.
Yeah.
And we've read a lot of both.
Yeah, we've read a lot of both. So we've covered Adanya Shibli. So as we said earlier, that's fiction, but not really. But okay. And then Mimi, you read a recent non-fiction book by Ben White.
I did read Ben White. So he's written quite a few books about the occupation. But the one that I read was called Israeli Apartheid, A Beginner's Guide, a bit of an introduction. And it's history, it's non-fiction, it's facts, there's graphs, there's facts and figures, but it is passionate and powerful and emotional. Again, a really short read, you know, and I think it's important in a way that it isn't a big textbook, because I think that can be off-putting. And he's very obviously written this to be an educational tool in a accessible way. It is not for history buffs. It is for people who are trying to understand the context of what happened in the 1940s at the very beginning of this occupation. And I thoroughly appreciated the effort that he's put into getting this out there. There are personal stories in there, there are case studies, there are pictures, and obviously pictures speak 1,000 words. So it packs a punch, and I will certainly be picking up the rest of his books. To kind of, and I will be sharing this because I think so many people are saying, I don't understand it.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. You know, it's not as, there isn't a black and white, there isn't a right and wrong. And actually, I think this is his books are a fantastic way of explaining the facts of what is happening in that part of the Middle East, and what people from the Palestinian community have been going through, and not just, you know, we'll talk about this later, but not just the Islamic community, but the Christian community and the other minorities that exist in Palestine.
And the Jewish community.
And the Jewish community, yeah.
And you know what? I've read Ben White's other 2 books.
Yeah.
I don't remember them, but we will be sure to share them. And it's one of those ones where exactly that, it's not that complicated. Like if you're able to digest South African history or Nazi Germany, which is what we're taught in curriculums here, then you can do the same with this this occupation and this history of Palestine. So I think the other thing to note is that the independent publishers have been really good at making these resources and these books accessible. So that's Pluto Press, Verso Books, Haymarket Books, Saki Books. All of their books are available as ebooks online at really, really small prices. And please,
all free.
And some free.
Yeah, I downloaded Ben White's book for free from Pluto Press as an ebook directly onto my phone.
And to be honest, the independent publishers have been really holding it down whilst everything's going on, knowing that people are taking interest in this. They've done a stellar job in promoting Palestinian voices that are on their books. And they've done a better job than the big publishing houses, dare I say. I just said it.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go back to fiction. Oma, this is a recent one that you read.
On one of my best of the year. I absolutely loved this book. And Linda's been telling me to read this for a while. And she's saying to me, I knew that you'd love it, Oma. That's why I've been telling you to read it. But I cried.
No one believes me. That's the problem. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I personally think it takes a lot to make me cry, but this was just so beautiful. It was so emotional, the relationships. So just a bit of a backstory. It starts off with Afaf, who is a head teacher at Nuruddin, which is a Muslim girls' school in America. And she's just going about her day, and you hear basically shooting. So you know that there's a school shooter. And then it goes back to her past. So you find out how she got to where she is and just like her backstory. And, you know, there's so many intricacies within the book. Like she comes from Palestinian, her parents are Palestinian immigrants. Her mum's had a hard time sort of settling in America. She's got an older sister and she's got a younger brother. And basically when she's about 7 years old, her older sister disappears, and that has a huge impact on her family, but especially her mum, who was really close to her older sister. And then it kind of skips back and forth between present day, which is at the school, what she's doing, and then it goes back and it sort of builds and builds, and then it kind of comes to a head where you find out how she got to be the head teacher. But just, it was so good.
So good. It's like moving fiction. And guys, if you're not subscribing or liking our posts, then now's the time to do it. You shameless plug in there. But I read The Beauty of Your Face a few years back now, and I really need to go back into the author's backlist. So that's The Beauty of Your Face by Sahar Mustafa, if you didn't catch that. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I knew I was right.
You're seldom wrong, Linda.
So back to non-fiction, Jess.
I also took advantage of some of the independent publishers putting a lot of their resources out for free. And I wanted something non-fiction. I wanted to hear directly from people in Palestine themselves. So I chose a collection of essays called Light in Gaza. And these are essays, poems, there's some photos and sort of short memoirs of people's families, their family histories, the situation they're currently living in now. And these voices are Palestinians based inside and outside of the occupied territories. So you get a really diverse range of voices from across the region and their experiences, what's happened to them in their lives. And importantly, they talk a lot about the future and their hopes for what the future might look like for them outside of occupation, being free. And they talk about the dreams of what they would like to be able to do, have jobs, celebrate themselves, their families. It's really moving. It's really hard to not read and feel empathy and want to help. The poems and photos in particular are also really a great addition to just, not just having these stories from the people alongside them, having the photos and the poetry to really illuminate the feeling and the emotion was just perfect. And it's a really easy set of short writings to get your teeth into and really come to grips with a understanding from a personal perspective of what's going on with the people over there.
Yeah.
So I would massively recommend you
I've
guys
not
pick
read
this
that
up.
one. I've not read that one, but I do really want to read
Yeah,
it. I love
please do.
hearing like short stories and
Yeah.
first-hand accounts of like what's going
Yeah.
on. And that's why I recently read 2 memoirs, both Palestinian voices. The first was I Saw Ramallah, which is like a classic by Mourid Barghouti. And he's a really famous Palestinian activist, author, poet, you name it. And he talks about displacement. Like that's the biggest theme that runs through the book, of just not really having a base, not really having a place to call home. Some of his family are in Jordan. He spent most of his time in Egypt, where he left his wife and his son. Then he went to Europe, where he was in Hungary. And then, you know, just all over the shop, went to the States. And it's like, where is home? And all he really wanted to do was get a permit to go back to Ramallah, which is where his family were from, but obviously couldn't go back there. So it was really moving. At some points, there's like some satire in there, because that's the way that Mourid writes. His other poetry collection, Midnight, is one that I would really recommend if you're into poetry as well, because again, it's so moving. And I personally, I'm not really a poetry buff. It's not the thing that I go to, but really enjoyed that collection. And then the other memoir that I recently read was In My Mother's Footsteps by Mona Hajar Halaby. I'm so happy that I came across this book, and it's one of my favorite ones that I've read this year. So this is a Palestinian Christian woman's experience with everything to do with Palestine. And people don't realize that there are other faiths that live in Palestine. I mean, Palestine is the birthplace of Jesus. It's the Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus of New Jersey. And so she speaks about her family's history, how, you know, they had to leave, her parents had to leave Jerusalem. They went to Egypt, then Lebanon, Syria, and then Europe. And then later on, you know, Mona herself settled in the States. And then she speaks about her story of how she wanted to get to know her family. So various trips with work took her actually back to Jerusalem and the West Bank, where she stayed for periods of time. And then in 2018, she decided to bring back her mum to the same places where her mum grew up. And that was exactly 60 years after the Nakba, which is the catastrophe of 1948, where her Palestinian parents and grandparents had to flee their homes. So obviously that was a very bittersweet and traumatic experience, you know, retracing the footsteps of her mum, her grandma, her great grandparents, and going to the same places, having, you know, visiting her own childhood home. At this point, her mother had like late stage dementia. So at some points it was, you know, like, yes, I really remember this vividly, and some points it really wasn't. And visiting her home and then opening, you know, knocking the door, and the person who opens the door has the original keys to the home that her parents had to flee in 1948. So that was just a really sad experience, but I would 100% recommend that book. So I think we've spoken a lot about the different books that there are. We've got amazing authors out there. So there is no excuse, people. There is absolutely no excuse. And if you go to our Instagram and TikTok, you'll find a plethora of reviews that go way back when. So you might have to scroll a little bit. But and if you tell us what you're reading as well, and tell us what books you recommend that we may have missed out. I think we're looking forward to reading a few in the future. So Tanya, what are you wanting to read next?
So I do want to read In My Mother's Footsteps. I don't usually read books like this. I would normally stick to like my fiction and my romance novels. But I think in times like this, it's really important to pick up a book like this and educate yourself. And I think reading is the best way. So In My Mother's Footsteps and Minor Details, you guys have sold it to me. So yeah, definitely going to be picking those up.
I think we might
Excellent.
fight over In My Mother's Footsteps, because I
know, because I've been
also-
trying to find these online and they're sold out everywhere. So I'm going to tell you to read The Beauty of Your Face as well. Yeah, you love that
Okay,
one.
maybe you can take In My Mother's and I'll read it.
Perfect. We can swap.
Do you know what? There's another book that I'm actually reading at the moment. It's a memoir called All Water Has a Perfect Memory. And I'm so dumb, I left it on the tube while I was like 20 pages, at the end, like near the end. And, yeah, I know. So yeah, I rebought it. But now the waiting list is like 3 months or something.
CFL lost property?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know where I lost it. But anyway, I hope we've educated you guys and inspired you to give you some recommendations and books that you want to read. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share and comment and let us know what you're reading as well. Don't forget that reading is the antidote to ignorance. So Thank you very much. See you later.